I love this film. You know, it makes a big difference if you can fall in love with a project. The first time Ridley phoned me and said, you know, what about a Gladiator movie? I just sort of started laughing because I was thinking about men in skirts and sandals. You know, and then he said, no, it's not like that. And he started telling me the story, and I thought, this could be good. This could be pretty amazing. And I went out to England in the first week when they were shooting out there, and, you know, I went down to deepest, darkest Farnham in the south of England, and it was snowing, it was cold, it was muddy. I mean, you've never seen mud like this. And, you know, as we were driving off the road into this wood where the battle was taking place, you know, you suddenly left the 20th century behind. And there's an image which keeps repeating in the movie, which is Russell Crowe before fight, reaching into the earth and touching the earth. I mean, he's a farmer. That's the idea. He needs to touch the earth. And I didn't know about this image, but I remember sitting there with Ridley in this muddy field, and because I suddenly had been shifted from the 20th century to somewhere else, I remember reaching down and just taking up a clump of earth, and sort of suddenly I was in the movie. God, you know, writing it, finding that first idea. I mean, I was always saying that about the Oscar. I mean, the Oscar would be this amazing thing if with the Oscar they gave you the first 4 bars of the next tune you have to write, because they are impossible. And you sit here and you're consumed by self-doubt, and you just know you can't ever do it again, and that you're a fraud, and you should be phoning the studio right now and telling them, you know, find yourself a real composer. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then suddenly something happens. You know, it's like, and I don't know how it happens, but suddenly something is there that's appropriate for this film. I mean, it happens to me on every movie. I found a tape recently which was just ideas for The Lion King, and there were 48 main themes on it. And, you know, they weren't bad, but they weren't right either. They weren't the right thing for that movie. And I have an hour's worth of material which nobody will ever hear, which I wrote for this movie, which was nearly right, but it wasn't quite, you know, it didn't quite... You know, it was like a suit, you know, that you buy in a department store. It looked all right, but it didn't quite fit, you know. We're speaking bespoke tailoring here. Gladiator cutting rooms were over there. You know, I was writing music over here. Not too far to go, and at the same time, we could close the door on each other. No, I mean, it's very collaborative. I mean, the whole idea on this film was that we would work together, for instance, in the same building. I mean, his cutting rooms are here at the studio, which makes a big difference because we can go and confer or interfere with each other's ideas, you know, whichever way you look at it. Which is truly a great way of working, because it makes sense of how one makes a movie. You know, not everybody is just sort of stuck away in a corner somewhere, you know, doing their own thing. It's a good way of working because everything informs everything else. I mean, if you think about the first image we have in the film, which, you know, you hear the name of the movie, it's called Gladiator, and then the first image you see, the hand on the wheat, it's so poetic. And in a way, it's music that gives you the license to be that poetic. I don't know, very early on, I don't know if it was Pietro or if it was Ridley, somebody kept playing a Dead Can Dance CD, you know, with Lisa Gerrard singing. And the more we were listening to it, the more we were going, can't we do something like that? And, you know, can't we find a singer to do something? And finally, the answer, of course, was, let's phone Lisa herself. And we sent her some footage, and she thought it looked pretty amazing. She was really interested, and she came over for, I think it was supposed to be 3 or 4 days. That turned into 4 or 5 months. And I sort of found this sort of musical soulmate suddenly. I mean, she's a formidable character insofar that she has an incredible aesthetic sense. She's a real artist. There are very few artists. Everybody's called an artist these days, but trust me, there are very few who are the real thing. And we just started trying things together. I mean, the whole wheat field, etc. I mean, you put the picture up, and you better be in record if she sees the picture, because amazing things will start happening. And we'd all be working together. Ridley would be sitting in this room, Lisa would be singing. You know, we'd do one take, and we'd turn around to Ridley and go, what do you think? And he'd be all sort of emotional, go, oh, I don't know, works for me. You know, I think it sort of shocked him partly the sort of emotional onslaught that comes out of her voice, because she digs very deep. We never use the language of music, and he never says, can we do this and can we do that? We talk about the scene, we talk about the characters, we talk about the light, we talk about what we're trying to accomplish. We're talking about, if I do this here, how will it affect something, you know, 20 minutes later? You know, how can we set up tone? How, you know, we're talking about aesthetics, we're talking about books we read, we're talking about other people's movies. Anything not to talk about the specifics of music, because there's no point. I mean, the thing that really became the main theme, Lisa kept calling it the Earth theme. You know, I mean, the first time I played it to her, she absolutely got what I was going after, which is actually this very, very beautiful theme, but I can turn it on its head, and before a battle, you really usually hear it down in the basses, and it's very threatening. And at the same time, it becomes the kiss, it becomes the figurines, it becomes the thing about family. But it's that sort of, it really is about this personal life of this character. And what was fun was to take this very humble theme and turn it into 1,000 different emotions. You know, just where it would be. And really it's about danger, it's about, and at the same time it's about peace.
At my signal, unleash hell.
This movie moves around a little bit geographically. I mean, we take in at least half the Roman Empire. We go from Germania, Germany, to Spain, and then to Morocco, and then to Rome. And what I wanted to do is, once we're in Morocco, I wanted it to be really tribal, dirty, gritty. I always wanted to use this one instrument for the sort of Moroccan sequences called the duduk, which is thousands of years old. It's really an Armenian clarinet, would be the easiest explanation. And there's one player that is amazing, a 72-year-old man called Jivan Gasparian. Of course, he lives in Armenia. And I kept thinking, I want to write for him. I want this to be about him. And everybody kept saying, just give up. He lives in Armenia. Unless you go to Armenia, it's never going to happen. And I just sort of doggedly kept writing for this guy. And one day I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Michael Brook, who said, oh, you know, Jivan's going to be in Los Angeles. And it was just sort of, you know, I just kept writing because I knew, you know, like if you build it, he will come. I just kept doing this. And it was great because he doesn't speak a word of English. He is, you know, he's a god in his own country. He has his own vodka named after him. And if you drink enough of this vodka, you know, the ice will melt and his face is on the inside of the label. You'll actually get to see his face. And so our communication, of course, was drinking vodka until we could see his face and him playing like a god.
Don't die. They'll feed you to the lions. They're worth more than we are.
This first chain fight, I mean, it's pretty out there, you know. I mean, I think the music will frighten the children, let alone the images. But the idea was that you go from this incredible ethnic, percussive, tribal thing into this sort of beautiful thing of actually getting into Rome, because, you know, the two scenes really flow from one into the other. So the two parts of the empire actually are linked. When I first looked at what Ridley had done with Rome, I suddenly realized, you know, that this was really a Leni Riefenstahl homage to Rome. And so I shamelessly put on my German hat and went into the sort of Wagner territory. Actually, literally from that first day in England, a couple of things happened. First of all, sitting in that tent and saying to Ridley, hang on a second, this is supposed to be a battlefield. Marcus Aurelius, he's got all this great furniture here, he's got all these amazing works of art around. You know, this can't be real. And Ridley said, no, come on. He was here for 16 years fighting these battles. He would have had, he would have brought all the things he needs as an emperor to have around him. And I was suddenly starting to think about how formal, how gracious, how civilized Rome was. And then, and we were looking at Roman architecture, we were looking at books of, Rome, and it's this civilized, it's this formalized thing where I suddenly thought, but at the same time it's all built on blood, it's all built on savagery, it's all built on the back of slaves. And I was thinking, how can I write a piece of music that has that sort of duality in it? And one of the things Ridley always lets me do, he lets me be crazy. So I had this idea that all the action sequences should be waltzes. Like a Viennese waltz. You can't think of anything more fluffy and civilized and such a beautiful form. Everything is just so and perfect. And I thought, what if I take the shape, the form of a waltz and just make them bloody, savage and brutal? Actually, I talked to Ridley about it, that he had this perfect form as well, the way Roman architecture is so perfect and so rounded, and that the music would do the same thing, but at the same time always speak to the darkest, nastiest instincts. It went really well for the first 3 seconds, and I suddenly realized what an impossible task I had set myself. But I just sort of kept persevering, and I wrote this huge sort of what we called the Gladiator waltz. And it literally, it was all these action scenes just kept in waltz time. And I sent it over to Pietro, and he started cutting the action scenes to it. It was really nice how the music and the images kept coming together even before they finished shooting, and how we could sort of inspire each other. And the dastardly experiment was actually starting to work out. Because look, there's no point working on a movie like Gladiator and not taking risks and not going out there, not being reckless. And then of course, the other thing was because he delivered such a huge canvas to me, I could go both ways. I could throw enormous forces at the images, or I could stay very small, very insidious. And, because the images are large. And I got away with playing actually very soulful, very emotional, slow music against large images, because the images would be, I was using them like the rest of my orchestra, basically. When we got to Carthage, we really had to, the Carthage battle, which is the first time we really see a battle within the Colosseum in Rome. We better pay off the expectations. And it's a complicated scene because it's all about strategy, it's all about military speak and stuff like this, and it's a noisy scene as well. And I noticed that the audience wasn't really, a test screenings wasn't really following what Maximus was trying to do with his troops. And so part of what it became about for me was to try to explain the strategy musically, so you really understood, okay, here are the good guys and they're not doing this, and here this is happening. And we kept previewing the movie with my temp versions of these pieces in. And I could actually use the reaction from the audience all the time and refine them and refine them and refine them until you really noticed, the audience was getting it, everything was very clear, and at the same time it was incredibly exciting. And it's sort of great that when in a movie I can actually use my language, which I think, of course, is incredibly articulate and far more articulate than these words that we're using all the time. to really get to the heart of things and really actually use it instead of an exposition scene. And again, I mean, Pietro had again cut it all to the infamous Gladiator waltz. So now we had a structure, and now I could move very freely within that. There's something great about going to previews and seeing it, just being within an audience that didn't know what to expect, and suddenly that scene comes on and you just knock their socks off. You never want to be caught at it. You never want to be caught at the idea. You just want people to feel that maybe there is some thought going on, but let them work it out themselves. And I know when we were recording it in London, the orchestra played amazingly well, and because they suddenly realized what I was doing, and they knew that I needed blood and guts from them, and they gave me blood and guts. I mean, I've done so many film scores now, and I have never seen the members of the orchestra wanting to know that much about the movie, wanting to see the images, wanting to be told the story. Usually they play the music and they play it beautifully and they play it well, but in this case they wanted to be part of the film more than anything else. The funny thing about Gladiator is there isn't one main theme, and I actually counted them the other day. There are 19 themes in this thing, which most of them we actually cover in the first 14 minutes. So the first 14 minutes are truly an overture to the whole movie, except when we get to this scene in Reel 8, it's like you get a whole new theme, because it sort of feels like all bets are off now. Everything is just raw emotion. Everything is, he's lost his mind finally. He will do crazy things out of passion. And it felt like I could turn everything upside down on its head and really, go for that very, very dark stuff.
For you. You loved me. That's how I loved you.
I remember Walter Parks coming in here for the first time, and I mean, this piece is actually sort of very, in inverted commas, arty, and Walter listening to it and going, "Oops, I didn't know you had that in you." I mean, he was genuinely surprised, and of course my question was, is that wrong? And he's going, no, don't change the note. Because it's those sort of things where you surprise the audience by not doing the obvious, by going against type, and actually, in a funny way, sort of what you do as a composer is you do forever expose yourself in a sort of a emotional way, where you let them see, into your deepest, darkest secrets.
Am I not merciful?
I take on the characters, which is maybe not the healthiest thing to do. I mean, my wife would love me to do just sex comedies, but because when I work on Gladiator, actually, I'll tell you this. After she saw Gladiator for the first time really recently, she hadn't seen a frame of it. And we had a preview, and she came along and she said, "Wow, unbelievable, what, great music, etc." And then she sort of punched me on the shoulder. And I'm going, "Why did you do that?" She goes, "Because now I know why you were so unbearable for the last 6 months." You always hear these stories of, how Hollywood is so merciless on composers and how they all get beaten up. Nobody beats me up as much as I beat myself up, because this is what I love doing, and I have one life to do it in, and I better do it right, I better do it well. I mean, after having done something like 80 movies or whatever it is, there are very few where I can actually say, hang on, you have done something that is worthwhile here. In this one, there are moments where I feel, okay, you have risen to the occasion, or you have not let your brothers down, because in a way, between Pietro, Lisa, Ridley, and myself, in that whole process at the end, seeing how hard everybody works, the one thing you don't want to do is let anybody down by not writing as good as you can, not being at the peak of whatever it is.
Gladiator. Soundtrack available in stores everywhere.